I love the song. It's like this mournful cry for freedom in the midst of, I don't know, the world's storm, where everything bumps and moves about. We long for freedom. We can't quite seem to grasp it. It's a mournful cry that is just echoed by, I don't know, the psalmist today, longing for the law to be able to provide structure for the world. It's echoed by the prophets, echoed in the Torah to begin with, and Paul and Jesus. They all long for freedom. In fact, freedom is at the heart of the gospel. That's really what it's all about, is that we can be free to live, to become, to be what it is we're called to be. It's part of the three major narratives. It's just thoroughgoing in the Scriptures. I mean, in the beginning of the Scriptures, we deal with God bringing the people out of slavery into freedom. We deal with God later in the Scriptures bringing people home from the bondage of exile. And then Jesus, the story of Jesus, gathers us up out of the bondage of death itself and breaks its bonds and allows us to be free, free to live, free to hope. But somehow freedom remains, I don't know, impossible to achieve, elusive. Consider, we're part of a information society now, right? It's the information age. What does that mean? That means there's lots of information out there that people can use to manipulate me and you. A few days ago I was perusing the New York Times, and there was a cool little ad on the side for one of those smart cars, one of those little cars. And I don't know if they know that I have a car with 170,000 miles on it or not, but I clicked on it, and I looked at it for a while, and it was fun. It was a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and do you know, it seems every time I search the web now, every site I go to, there's that smart car. Happened with an acoustic guitar amplifier I was considering purchasing too. Yeah, we're not really free. I mean, and this has been going on for years and years. Of course, they use our sexual drives and our feelings of being outcast to sell things to us. We're not really free. We'd like to be, but it's foolish to think that we are. Even our mirror neurons, tend to form our minds along with our neighbors. It is still a puzzle to me how I possibly could agree with Barbara as much as I do. Considering where we started, I mean. It's the information age. And then that's not the worst of it, because what's insidious is how fear manages to control our behavior. I mean, you think about the financial instability and the kind of ethics that brought us to this point. The greed that makes us afraid. And so it is that when we're in a situation where we've got to protect ourselves, it's hard for us not to be greedy. It's hard for us not to close our hearts to other people around us. And then fear of war and terror. Are they going to hurt us? Somehow in our culture it manages to justify murder. I went to see The Bourne Legacy while I was in Boulder with Matthew. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's, not much really. It's fun if you like that sort of thing. But one line really struck me because it's oh so American these days. It was when one of the leaders was trying to convince the assassin that what they were doing was actually something that was appropriate. And he said, "We are morally indefensible and absolutely necessary." Morally indefensible and absolutely necessary. I actually think a tremendous number of people in our country would agree that that's what's appropriate to protect ourselves from the terror in the world. Free? It doesn't seem to me as though we're free. We're bound up in fear. We're bound up with greed. We are controlled all too much from the outside in, and we live in a free country. Consider the rest of the world. So how do we get there? if the gospel is all about freedom? If Paul says it is for freedom that Christ has set us free, stand firm, don't submit to a yoke of slavery again, what does he mean and how do we get there? Well, here's where Confucianism and Judaism and Christianity really resonate. For Confucius, one becomes free when one is in right relationship with everything around you. It's called Ren. That's the condition of being in right relationship with everyone around you. It's very similar to Shalom, actually. And how do you get there? Well, you live within the structure of the created order. It's called Li. You live out the rituals, you live out the commands, you live in a way that sets your mind and sets your heart in right relation with everything around you. It's really resonant with the concept of law, Torah, in the Old Testament and the New. You know, God released the people from Egypt, but in order to be truly free, the people needed law. They needed the structure coming from the presence of God, the Almighty, the one that is creation. They needed that law in order to be free. And so in both cases, the resonance says that if we want to be free, we must follow law. But that is problematic in and of itself, isn't it? Elusive, getting right beyond us, because the moment we talk about following law, we are no longer free. We live under that sense of the wrath of God. We worry. Are we following the right laws? We are judgmental of other people who aren't following the laws that we think they ought to follow. We figure we have to hold on to law that was given long, long time ago, whether or not it is culturally appropriate for us now. The law has a way of binding us. It was the center of what Paul's gospel was about what Jesus was saying, that it's not the law that in the end is going to give you freedom. Not at all. So if the only thing that we can do to achieve freedom is to follow the law, but law itself becomes that which binds us, what shall we do? And our text in Psalm 119 tells us. In fact, I should have read the whole thing to you, except it goes on for 6 pages. It's like an enormous ode to the law. But what it's really about is when you listen to this person, my soul clings to the dust. Revive me according to your word. When I told you of my ways, you answered me. Now teach me your statutes. Make me understand the way of your precepts, and I will meditate on wondrous works. I run the way of your commandments, for you enlarge my understanding. This person is reaching for and loving the law. It is not something that is imposed from the outside that he must fear. Instead, it is something that he internalizes, that allows him to reach out to the one that offers the freedom, to the one that can show him the way, as his understanding is enlarged. Experience after experience, development and growth, the law beginning to shift and change in his arms. Confucius said that somebody who's formed in Li, the gentleman, knows what is moral. It is the small man who knows what is profitable. Curious. It's when we are formed in the law that we have an opportunity to live freely within it. The reason that little piece in the Born Legacy struck me, morally indefensible, absolutely necessary. The reason it struck me is because that's precisely what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said. I've told you the story before, but I'll remind you. Bonhoeffer was a resistor of the Third Reich, and because he had connections to the army through his older brothers, He had an opportunity to be part of an assassination plot against Hitler. The assassination plot failed. He was arrested and he was ultimately executed for it. But while he was in prison, he tried to figure out how he, a doctrinaire pacifist, who felt that violence was morally indefensible, could come to the conclusion that it was absolutely necessary. And what he realized is that when one is formed in the law, when one reaches for the law, when one loves the law, then the wisdom and command of God becomes clear in those moments. If it were Dietrich Bonhoeffer telling the assassin when it was that he should work, I might feel better about it than the people that were doing it in the movie. That's the nature of our law. Our church has just gone through a big thing where we're trying to figure out whether or not there is a law that says that you really should not be and act as a homosexual in the world. Maybe at one time that law made some sense in some society somewhere, but people formed in the law are very clearly coming to the conclusion that the center of the law, the nature of the law, that which gives us freedom, is saying, no, that law must change in order to be true to God's command in the world. The thing is, it's always true that when human beings are developing and growing, when they're taking steps forward, that's when, as Dylan's song puts it forward, the storms start to flash. Freedom is chiming, but there's disruption, there's thunder, there's lightning, there's sadness. There are people left behind. And these last decades, maybe other ones too, but these last decades, we've been in such a time in the church especially. A time that is fruitful, a time that's full and exciting for what's possible for the formed of God. But in order for us to take advantage of that, in order for us to live as God's loved people, as God's free people, you and I are called upon to love and to meditate upon God's law. What did the Spirit have to say to you about freedom? Mike?
For some reason, the first thing that came to my mind was Robert Frost, who said that free verse is like playing tennis without a net. when there's no structure, it actually limits the ability to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that.
Yeah. Thank you. Wonder if I can work that in next service.
I thought of the Civil Rights Museum that we visited when we were in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
This is a fabulous place, and just all the people went through at that time for freedom, and we made great strides, but in that regard, we still have a ways to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've been thinking about all the talk about freedom and the election and things like that, ranging from you can't tell me what to do to this is the way it's got to be. And we're always rebalancing and bouncing back and forth between them. It seems like you never quit rebalancing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think freedom takes a tremendous amount of work. Let me read you a little piece by a woman named Brenda Euland. It's going to be the call to worship next service. To me, is a little bit of a meditation on if you're going to meditate on the law, what does that mean to meditate on the law? Honor thy father and thy mother. Freedom, the active, willing, do-it-now man thinks and makes note of this daily, sets his jaw, and thinks he does honor them, which he does not at all, and which, of course, his father and mother know and can feel, since nothing is hidden by outer behavior. The idle, creative man says, honor thy father and thy mother. That's interesting. I don't seem to honor them very much. I wonder why that is. And his imagination creatively wanders on until perhaps it leads him to some truth, such as the fact that his father is a peevish and limited man and his mother is unfortunately rattle-brained. This distresses him, and he puzzles and thinks and hopes again and